If you make jams, jellies or marmalades, you'll already know that many of the recipes call for you to add pectin to the fruit. But did you know you can make your own liquid pectin really simply for absolutely no money? Let me show you how. Hello and welcome to English Country Life. Welcome to the kitchen on a grey, horrible autumnal day. We're better off in here than we are out there, trust me. Welcome to Make Your Own Pectin. When we did our gooseberry jam video, we mentioned we make our own pectin and people were intrigued and asked to know more. And recently we did a video on dried apple rings, and again the subject of pectin came up and people asked us to show it. So here we are. Pectin is a polysaccharide found in fruit. It doesn't matter what that means. It's a thing found in fruit in varying amounts. Some fruit has enough of it to set jams, jellies, marmalades, etc. Some don't. And for those that don't, you need to add it into the mix. And how it works is pectin, cooked at a high temperature in the presence of acid and sugar, forms chains like a lattice work. And that lattice supports the jam and jelly and allows it to set to a firm consistency. Without it, you just get slop. Now, for those fruits that don't have enough pectin naturally, we need to extract it from somewhere that does and add it into the jam. And that's what we're about today. There are no complicated recipes, no complicated equipment, nothing you won't find in the average kitchen to this. And do you know what's even better? You don't have to measure anything. It's really simple. Let's take a look at how it's done. Here is my secret ingredient for making pectin. Apple skins and apple cores. And weirdly, pectin likes the bits of apple and the types of apple that are not much used for anything else. So pectin is found naturally in unripe apples, in the skin, in the core, especially in crab apples and in cooking apples. You put all of those things together, so you get some apple core, some apple skin, some crab apples off the crab apple tree that you planted to pollinate your orchard, and you've got the perfect material that is packed with pectin. And the only thing then is working out how to get it out. So we've got apple cores and apple skins because we produce dried apple rings. And those dried apple rings, one of the things we don't want are the skins and the cores. But let's not throw them away. We'll keep them and we'll make pectin. Now what we also have is crab apples that we grow to help pollinate our orchard. So let's go and grab some of those as well. This is the view outside the kitchen door. Shall we have a cup of tea and wait just half an hour before we get those crab apples? What do you think? That's all our ingredients. Cores and skins from the apples we've prepared for dried apple rings, the fruit of our crab apple tree that we keep for pollinating the orchard, and some tap water. If you haven't got them, have you got those little apples on your apple tree? You know, the ones that are rubbish and you're never going to eat, you're never going to cook with? Got some of them? Just chop the whole lot up roughly. That's perfect. Got some unripe cooking apples? Equally brilliant. One thing you don't want is all those delicious sweet dessert apples. You want them a little bit unripe, you want them a little bit sour, and you want, frankly, all the bits of an apple that you normally don't use for anything else. That's the great thing about pectin. It's using up stuff you wouldn't use ordinarily. Let's see what we do with it. In order to make our pectin, what we need to do is put a splash of water in a pan, add our cores and our skin and our crab apples and our cooking apples and our failed to grow apples in the big pan and cook it into a liquid that we can strain the solids from. We don't want too much water, just enough to stop it burning. Once we've got the water in the bottom of the pan, just tip in all the apple stuff. Doesn't matter what order, doesn't have to be particularly massively mixed. All we need is a load of strong apples with plenty of pectin in, so skins and cores, etc., in the pan on top of the water. Nothing more to it than that. Clearly I'm doing quite a large batch in this pan. You don't have to. Use whatever pan size you want, however many apples you've got, to produce the right amount of pectin for your needs, for your family. The process is simple. All I'm going to do, turn on the gas and then turn it down, gently bring that water to the boil and reduce the crab apples, the cores, the peel, etc. to a soft pulp. Once you've got the liquid up to a boil, keep stirring it, and what you're trying to do is get those crab apples to burst, the skins to go soft, and to cook all the other bits of apple, cores, etc. down into a pulp. We're almost trying to make apple soup. This is a very visual process, there's no real recipe. But what we're aiming to do is use just enough water to cook all the flesh off the inside of the skins, off the cores, to burst the crab apples and get the flesh cooked out of those into a thick pulp. And over time you will find that the material cooks down and you want just enough water to surround the flesh. You will probably have to add some more water, but don't add more than you need to. As here, just enough that the water is coming up to the level of the top of the fruit. Some of the larger pieces I find a bit difficult to cook down, so I will tend to break them up with a potato masher once they're softened. Particularly the apple cores seem to take a lot longer than the rest to cook down. It does them no harm to break them up. We're actually trying to force the pectin out of the fruit. And eventually this is what you'll get. It's something like thick vegetable soup, and the liquid part should be much thicker than water. It should kind of feel a bit like stirring tomato sauce. That sort of level of thickness. Once we've cooked the apple down to a right consistency, we need to strain the liquid off the pulp. I use a very fine flour sieve to do that, but if you haven't got one, use an ordinary household sieve, even a colander. Just line it with something like muslin or cheesecloth first, because we don't want any fine bits of the pulp dripping through to the liquid in the bowl. Then let everything cool to room temperature before we move on. Once the liquid has cooled, we need to test to make sure that it is going to work as pectin. And to do that, we'll use a small amount of methylated spirit, also known as denatured alcohol, in a bowl. And all we do is take a couple of spoonfuls of the cooled liquid pectin and drop those spoonfuls into the methylated spirit. And then we stir it with a fork for often only a matter of seconds, but anything up to 1 minute is absolutely fine. And if we've got our liquid pectin right, it will gel in the alcohol, and that's the same effect that you'll see if it's set in jam. If it doesn't gel, return the rest of the liquid pectin to the heat, boil it down and test again. Once we've tested our liquid pectin, we've got to preserve it. We may use some of it this year, we may use some of it straight away. It's a good time to do blackberry jam, for example, right now. But odds are we're going to want some of this next summer to do our strawberry jams, raspberry jams, etc. And the season for most of those is pretty much over here. So how to preserve it? Well, you can can it. You can can it in exactly the same way you would apple juice. If you home can, that's a really good and viable way of doing it. If you don't home can, freeze it. It freezes wonderfully. And freeze it in useful portions. Fiona came up with a brilliant idea for doing this with fruit a few years ago, and it works just as well for liquid pectin. Muffin trays. especially the silicone ones, because it's so easy to turn something out from a silicone muffin tray. And a silicone muffin mould holds about half a jar of liquid pectin. So really useful sort of size. If I want to do what would have taken a whole bottle of liquid pectin, I just used 2 muffins. Now, one little warning. When I first did this, I filled the tray like that and tried to carry it to the freezer. And of course, it's all bendy and sloppy and the stuff went everywhere. If you're going to do this, put it on a baking tray or a bit of flat board or something like that first and transport it on something rigid into the freezer until it's frozen. What we then do is turn them out, wrap them individually, pop them in a bag in the freezer, and they're there to use anytime we want. Now, if you don't use as much liquid pectin as we do, ice cube trays work just as well, and you can work out the right amount for small runs of jam using the cubes of liquid pectin from an ice cube tray, just according to what sort of size of batches of jam and marmalade and jellies you make. Do whatever size suits you best. Let's look at how we do that. The best way I find of filling these muffin trays is to transfer the pectin into a jug. Don't overfill each individual muffin tray because it will spill when you come to transport the tray to the freezer. The frozen pectin just pops so easily out of the muffin trays, it just makes the job trouble-free. I wrap each individual piece of pectin up in some paper before putting them back in a freezer bag, just to stop them sticking together. So what we've ended up with is 3 bags, each with 6 of these little muffins in them, and that's a lot of liquid pectin. That will do for next year's jamming. But if it didn't, as you've seen, it's very easy to make some more. The only thing is, you've got to do it in apple season. So having a way of preserving it makes sense. So to sum up the method, apple cores, apple skins, unripe cooking apples, crab apples, chop them up, stew them up, get the liquid to the consistency of emulsion paint, pass it through a sieve, drop a little bit in some methylated spirits, denatured alcohol, see if it gels. If it does, you've got pectin. Freeze it, can it. You don't need muffin trays. Freeze it in your ice cube tray, stick it in some old yogurt pots, anything that works. And what you end up with is free liquid pectin for your jamming. Such a simple process. If you're enjoying content like this, can you spare us 5 seconds? Give us a thumbs up down below. If you really want to help the channel out, leave us a comment. Share these videos on Twitter and Facebook. That makes a huge difference to us. And if you want to see more of them, hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon next to it, and you'll hear every time we upload a new video. But whatever you do, come back and see us soon. Take care.